Welcome to Midnight Affairs Tales, where secrets don't sleep. Tell us where you're watching from, then buckle up. And most important, never forget to subscribe to our channel. Starts now. Chapter 1. The fire swallowed the night. Smoke curled into the stars, turning the sky a murky red, as if the heavens themselves were bleeding. Sergeant Daniel Rourke, boots caked in mud and sweat still drying on his skin from a 3-day hike, stared up at the inferno rising in the distance. He was supposed to be gone, halfway to the coast, on the first real break he'd taken in years. But something had felt off. It started with the anonymous message. Encrypted. No signature. Just GPS coordinates and a timestamp, sent to a military-secured channel only Daniel had access to, because no one else alive still had the clearance. It shouldn't have existed. The operation that channel belonged to had been buried 13 years ago. Codename, Silent Horizon. Daniel had stared at the message for an hour, then packed his bag. His instincts didn't ask questions, they gave orders. So now, here he was, standing at the edge of a blazing property near Barrow Ridge, a town so unremarkable it hadn't been on any operational maps, ever. It was supposed to be safe, quiet, civilian. But this was no ordinary house fire. It burned too clean, too fast. Accelerants had been used, he could smell them. Napalm grade, military level, and someone wanted to erase everything inside. Daniel ran toward the farmhouse, ignoring the burn in his legs. Heat pressed against him like an invisible wall, but he shoved through. The front door was splintered inward, smoke pouring through the cracks like a living thing. Inside, it was chaos. Timber beams collapsed in bursts of sparks. A woman's scream cut through the crackling like a blade, followed by silence. Daniel dropped low, hand on the grip of his sidearm, eyes sharp. Then he heard it. A child, coughing, gasping for breath. Help! The voice came through the smoke. Small, fragile. Daniel moved fast, bypassing a flaming hallway and slipping through a side room nearly overtaken by fire. The sound came from the corner, under a desk, the charred legs barely holding it up. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Shirt torn, hair singed, eyes wild with fear. Daniel reached under, pulled him out, and wrapped the boy in his jacket. "I got you. You're okay," he said, voice steady like always. The house groaned overhead. The second floor gave way. Daniel didn't wait. He ran, through the back, bursting out into the cold night air just as the roof caved in. He kept going, past the tree line, until the boy stopped shaking. Only then did he kneel and look the kid in the eye. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. The boy blinked, trembling, face black with soot. Then he said it. 2 words. That's all. But they didn't belong to a child. They belonged to a ghost. Echo 7, the boy said. Daniel's world went still. His breath locked in his throat. Echo 7 wasn't a name. It was a kill code. A fail-safe directive used only in the most extreme Black Ops missions, tied directly to Silent Horizon. Only 6 people had ever known it. 5 were dead. Daniel was the 6th. And he had buried Echo 7 with a bullet and a body in a war zone far from here. Or so he thought. "Who told you that?" Daniel asked, barely above a whisper. The boy looked confused, eyes searching. "Hey." "He told me to say it if someone came," the boy said. "He said you'd protect me." "Who's he?" The boy paused. "He said not to say his name." Daniel stared at the flames still rising in the distance. His blood turned to ice. This wasn't a rescue. It was a message. Someone had dragged him back into the past, back to an operation he swore was over, back to a truth he'd spent years trying to forget. He stood, hoisting the boy in his arms. They had to move. Fast. Because if someone had gone to the trouble of sending that code through that channel, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They spent the night hiding in a supply shack 20 miles out, beneath an abandoned ranger station. Daniel rigged a motion sensor trap outside and set a silent alarm on his wrist. The boy was asleep, curled against a stack of old camping blankets. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the wall, sidearm in hand. scanning through old memories like a man digging up his own grave. Echo 7 was part of a covert sub-tier program nested within Silent Horizon. It wasn't just a kill code. It was an identity used during infiltration missions where deniability was everything. There were no records, no footage, only whispers and bodies. Daniel had worn that identity once. For 3 months in Eastern Europe, inside a human trafficking ring run by rogue military officials. It was the darkest mission of his life, and the most personal, because Echo 7 wasn't just a name. It was the code name of a man Daniel had killed. A traitor who had gone too deep, who had started to enjoy the cruelty. The only person Daniel had ever executed outside of command protocol. And now a boy, no older than 7, was saying the name like it was his lifeline. Morning broke slowly. Fog clung to the ground like a second skin. Daniel brewed black coffee using a battered thermos and watched the treeling. The boy stirred. "Are you hungry?" Daniel asked. The boy nodded. Daniel handed him a protein bar. As he chewed, the boy looked up. "He said you'd come." "Who?" "The man in the chair. He was always in the shadows. But he knew everything. He said if the fire ever happened, it meant they were coming, and I had to find you." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Did he ever tell you why they'd be coming?" The boy hesitated. "Because I know something I'm not supposed to know." Daniel looked into those eyes, hollow with trauma, far too old for someone so young. And something inside him broke. He'd seen it before. The face of a child used like a pawn. Whoever this kid was, he wasn't random. Someone had made sure he survived that fire. And someone wanted Daniel to follow the breadcrumbs. He didn't know why yet. But one thing was certain, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He reached into his bag, pulled out a small satellite phone, and entered a code only he still remembered. It rang once, then connected. A voice on the other end said, "You shouldn't be calling this number." Daniel replied, "Echo 7 is alive." There was silence. Then the line went dead. No goodbye, no instructions, just silence. Daniel closed the phone and turned to the boy. "Tell me everything," he said. The boy looked up, eyes flickering with fear and something else. Determination. He opened his mouth to speak. And then, from outside the shack, the silent alarm buzzed on Daniel's wrist. They weren't alone anymore. The silent alarm buzzed again, 3 short pulses. Someone had tripped the outer sensor. Daniel's body reacted before thought kicked in. He scooped the boy up and moved to the far corner of the shack, behind a stack of rusted gas canisters. He placed the boy behind him and drew his sidearm. Through the crack in the wall, Daniel could see fog curling between the trees. The motion sensor he'd wired to the tripwire was 10 yards out, just past a half-fallen fence. Too far to see clearly in this light. But someone was definitely out there. One person, heavy boots, slow movement. They were approaching carefully, not like someone looking for shelter. This was methodical, tactical, military. Daniel whispered to the boy, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The boy nodded. Daniel moved like a ghost, crossing to the door, pressing his back to the frame. He clicked the safety off and waited. Then he heard the faintest crunch of gravel. Whoever it was trained, but not trained well enough. Daniel slammed the door open and swung around the corner, gun raised, but he didn't shoot. The figure was already aiming at him. A woman, mid-30s, tactical vest, holstered pistol, and eyes as sharp as broken glass. Recognition flashed across both their faces. "Rourke," she said, lowering her weapon half an inch. "You're a hard man to find." Daniel's voice was like stone. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yeah, well," she smirked, "so are you." Her name was Captain Maeve Keller, and she had vanished 9 years ago during Operation Iron Veil. Everyone believed she'd died in a failed extraction off the Baltic coast. Daniel had seen the footage himself, satellite imagery of a boat going up in flames. But now she stood in front of him, very much alive. "Why are you here?" Daniel asked, not lowering his weapon. Keller raised both hands slowly. "Same reason you are. Echo 7. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Where did you hear that name?" "I didn't hear it," she said. "I read it." Off a burn notice that crossed my old channel last week. Code red Ghost Protocol. Unauthorized revival of a terminated identity. All it said was one line. If Echo 7 speaks, the truth dies. Daniel kept his finger on the trigger. You expect me to believe you just found me? Keller glanced past him, toward the shack. I followed the message trail. The same one you did. Daniel didn't answer. Then, from inside, the boy's voice called out, "Is it safe?" Keller's eyes widened. She pushed past Daniel before he could stop her, entering the shack and kneeling beside the boy. Her expression changed, hardened into something Daniel couldn't read. "This him?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "He knows the code. Said someone told him to find me." Keller looked the boy over. "You got a name, kid?" The boy hesitated. "They call me Finn." Keller blinked. "That's not your name." "How would you know?" Daniel asked. Keller stood slowly, voice quiet but sharp. "Because that boy was declared dead 11 years ago, in a camp outside Dragovan. The son of our target." Daniel's heart dropped. "You're saying he's his kid?" Keller nodded. "The traitor. The one you executed. Echo 7 wasn't just a code. It was his field alias. And this kid, he's his blood." Daniel felt the room tilt. "That's not possible. I confirmed the kill. There was no child." "Not then," Keller said. "But months before the takedown, he moved a woman out of the field. Pregnant. Intel missed it. She vanished. Now we know why." Daniel stared at Finn. This changed everything. He wasn't just a message. He was a living secret. A time bomb. They drove west, into the mountains, using an old off-grid path Keller claimed to know from her escape years ago. The boy slept in the back seat of a rusted Jeep she'd stolen from a ranger depot. Keller filled Daniel in as they drove. "I went underground after Iron Veil," she said. "The mission was compromised from the top. Orders came down to eliminate the whole team. I got out by faking the blast. Since then, I've been tracking ghosts." "Whose ghost?" "Yours. Mine. Echoes. Everyone tied to Silent Horizon." Daniel glanced at her. "Why?" "Because it didn't die with us," Keller said. "They just renamed it, wrapped it in new paper, and sold it to a private contractor. Now it's back. And someone wants the boy dead to erase the last connection to what really happened." Daniel's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "What did really happen?" Keller took a long breath. "You thought you killed Echo 7. But that wasn't his death order. That was his exit strategy." Daniel looked at her, confused. "He wanted to disappear. He fed you just enough intel to justify a clean kill. But the moment he went down, someone higher up cleaned the scene. Buried the files. Burned the bodies. Echo 7 wasn't just a rogue agent. He was a gatekeeper. Holding back something big. Something someone still wants buried." Daniel processed this, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "So what now?" "We find the last person who knew the truth." Daniel frowned. "There is no one else." Keller gave a tight smile. "There's one." Daniel slammed the brakes. The Jeep skidded to a stop. "You're not serious." "He's alive," Keller said. "The handler. The one who ran the entire operation. He went dark 12 years ago. But I've been tracking him. He's hiding in plain sight." Daniel's heart pounded. The handler was a myth. A phantom above command. He pulled strings, but never showed his face. "What's the location?" Daniel asked. Keller opened a weathered notebook, flipped through coordinates. Then she said it. "Vienna." Daniel stared ahead, jaw clenched. "Europe." That meant they'd be running deep into enemy waters. Old enemies. Old debts. They were about to unearth a secret no one wanted found. And they were taking a boy, an innocent, straight into the lion's den. Daniel looked into the rearview mirror at Finn. The kid was still asleep. But what Daniel saw wasn't rest. It was the calm before the storm. And something in the boy's face chilled him. Because behind the soft features and childhood scars, there was something else. Awareness. Memory. Training. Daniel knew that look. He'd seen it in mirrors. Finn wasn't just Echo 7's son. He'd been prepared. Trained for something. Something coming. And now, with enemies closing in on all sides, the question hung in Daniel's mind like a guillotine. Who really sent the message? And why give a child a code name only a killer would know? Vienna was a city that wore its silence well. Beneath its gilded cathedrals and cobbled streets, secrets hummed like electric current behind ancient walls. Daniel Rourke hadn't set foot here in over a decade. Not since Operation Vulture Cross, when 3 agents were burned in a hotel suite and no one ever found the bodies. Now he was back, with a child who shouldn't exist, with a partner he thought long dead, and with ghosts on his heels. The plan was simple. Get in, find the handler, get out. But Daniel knew better than anyone. Nothing about this was going to stay simple. They parked in the garage of a crumbling apartment block on the edge of the city's 2nd district. Keller had secured the flat through a deep cover alias, one she'd built years ago, just in case this day ever came. It was a sparse 3rd-floor safe house with boarded windows, no digital footprint, and a single burner phone. Daniel sat in the dark, staring at the kid. Finn, 7 years old, maybe 8, couldn't remember his real name, could recite code sequences in 3 languages, slept with his eyes half open, always knew where the exits were. This wasn't a normal child, and that scared Daniel more than any enemy ever had. Where'd you learn the code? Daniel asked him again. Finn looked down. I told you. The man in the shadows. He said it was my shield. Did he ever call himself something else? Anything besides Echo 7? Finn nodded. He called himself Father. Daniel's heart stopped. Not my father. Just Father. Cold. Formal. It didn't sound like a child's memory. It sounded like programming. Keller stepped in from the hallway, lowering her voice. We've got movement. External cam picked up a sweep team across the street. Civilian clothes. No badges. No weapons drawn. But they're checking buildings. Agency? Daniel asked. She shook her head. Too sloppy. Looks like private contract muscle. Could be connected to Obsidian. Daniel tensed. Obsidian Black, a shadow paramilitary group that swallowed old government programs and turned them into cash machines. Mercs. Interrogators. What work? The ghosts after the ghosts. If Obsidian was sniffing around, things were worse than he thought. We don't have time, Keller said. We move now, or we get buried. Daniel turned to Finn. You ready? The boy looked up at him. There was no fear in his eyes. Only calm. Too calm. They exited through the back stairs, ducked through an alley, and slipped into the subway. Keller led the way, navigating blind spots and camera-dead zones like she'd never left the field. The destination was buried beneath the city, an old Cold War safe house turned black-site archive. The kind of place even the CIA pretended didn't exist. That's where the handler was hiding. Or at least, that's what Keller believed. You sure he's here? Daniel whispered as they stepped off the train. I'm sure, she said. He is one tell. Always checks into safe zones using the same alias, Dr. Leon Varga. Registered yesterday. Coded access entry. Biometric override. No press. No trace. They emerged into an underground tunnel flanked by locked doors. Keller stopped in front of a metal door marked with only a red number, 13. She pulled a keycard from inside her boot and slid it through the panel. The door clicked. They stepped inside. The room was dim, dusty. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Old CRT monitors flickered in the corner. A rusted coffee machine hissed quietly. In the back, a man sat at a steel desk, back turned, typing something onto a cracked keyboard. Dr. Varga, Keller said, voice cold. Long time. The man didn't turn. I knew you'd come, he said. But I didn't think you'd bring him. He turned then. Daniel froze. It wasn't just recognition. It was betrayal. Because he knew that face. Not from the files. Not from photos. From the mission. From Dragovin. From the room where they planned Echo 7's takedown. You son of a bitch, Daniel whispered. You were the handler. Varga smiled. Still am. Daniel drew his pistol. You lied to us. You set us up. Varga didn't flinch. Of course I did. Because I had to. Keller stepped forward. You sent us in to kill a traitor, when all along, he was your operative. Varga stood, slow, deliberate. Echo 7 was more than an agent. He was a prototype. First of a generation. You think we were just eliminating traffickers? No, we were building something. A new kind of weapon. Daniel glanced at Finn. What did you do to him? He asked. Varga's voice dropped. We enhanced him. Built training into memory. Reflexes into instinct. Language, math, emotional suppression. The perfect vessel. He's a child, Daniel growled. He's a blueprint, Varga snapped. Keller raised her gun. This ends here. Varga smirked. You really think I'm alone? Suddenly the lights cut out. Everything plunged into black. Then the emergency backup kicked on. Red light. And 3 shapes stepped through the door behind them. Armed. Silent. Not mercs. Killers. Obsidian. Daniel grabbed Finn, pushed him behind a file cabinet, and opened fire. Gunfire lit the room. Keller dropped one with a perfect shot to the throat. Daniel flanked left, took another through the chest. The third dove behind the desk, returning fire. Glass exploded. Cabinets toppled. Varga disappeared in the chaos. Then, silence. Smoke filled the air. Daniel stepped forward. The room was littered with bodies. Keller leaned against a cabinet, blood dripping from her shoulder. He's gone, she said. Daniel looked around. Varga had vanished through an escape hatch behind the desk. But something else caught Daniel's eye. A small drive. Half-burned. Hidden under the desk. Labeled in permanent marker. Project. God Hand. Daniel picked it up. And the moment he did, Finn spoke. Very softly. In a voice that wasn't his own. Protocol activated. Subject confirmed. Daniel turned to him. Finn. The boy blinked once. And then, in a perfect mimic of Varga's voice, said, If you're hearing this, it's already begun. Daniel took a step back. What is this? Finn's eyes flickered like static. Then he collapsed. Unconscious. Daniel caught him before he hit the ground. Keller stared, pale. What the hell did they do to him? Daniel looked at the drive. The label. The burned corners. God Hand isn't a mission, he said. It's a weapon. And now it had woken up. Vienna burned behind them in silence. Not with fire, but with tension, an invisible blaze that followed them through alleyways and across rooftops, down sewers and beneath shadows. The moment they left the archive, Daniel knew they were targets now. Every step forward was a step into crosshairs. Keller drove, one-handed. The other pressed against her shoulder where the bullet had grazed her. Daniel sat in the back with Finn, who hadn't spoken since the collapse. He lay across the seat, pale and still, his breath shallow but steady. Where to? Keller asked. Out of country, Daniel replied. We need to vanish. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Obsidian's got eyes in every city from here to the Atlantic. And now that Varga's gone dark, they'll assume we have the drive. We do have the drive. Keller glanced at the rear view. Exactly. Daniel looked down at the object in his hand. The USB was half-melted. The label Project, God Hand, was scorched but legible. It felt heavier than it should. Not in weight, something deeper. Like whatever was inside it had gravity. He'd seen black projects come and go. But this wasn't just another experiment in mind control or drone tech. This was something else. The way Finn had spoken, like a recording embedded inside him, was not natural. It was design. Intentional. Weaponized. They stopped at a safe house Keller had stashed years ago, an old hunting cabin deep in the Tyrolean Alps. Off-grid. No signal. No cameras. No neighbors. Just snow, stone, and wind. Inside, Daniel placed Finn on a cot and connected the drive to an ancient military laptop Keller had buried under floorboards. It took 6 minutes to decrypt. Then the screen lit up with a single phrase, Project, God Hand. Initiated below that, a file tree. Dozens of documents. Video files. Transcripts. DNA logs. Daniel clicked the first video. A cold blue-lit lab appeared. A row of children stood in metal cubicles, IVs in their arms. Machines buzzed. A voice narrated from off-screen. Subject 7 shows advanced neurological imprinting response. Memory retention exceeds 90%. Language acquisition stabilized at 36 months. Behavioral obedience at 93% after Phase 3 exposure. Daniel froze. Subject 7. Finn. The screen shifted. A younger version of the boy, maybe 4 years old, stood perfectly still as a man in a black coat circled him. "Who am I?" the man asked. "You are father," the boy replied. "What is pain? Data. What is fear? An error. What are you?" "I am what remains." Daniel shut the laptop. Keller had gone pale. Jesus Christ. They built him like a war algorithm. "No," Daniel said, voice low. "They broke him. Over and over again." He looked over at Finn, still unconscious. He wasn't just some experiment's child. He was the experiment. All along. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Memories haunted him. Not of war, but of the mission. Dragovin. The compound. The kill. He remembered the man, Echo 7. How calm he was. How he let Daniel pull the trigger. "Sometimes the enemy isn't outside the wire," Echo 7 had said. "Sometimes it's in your orders." Daniel didn't understand it then. He did now. They hadn't just sent him to silence a traitor. They sent him to bury the truth. And now the truth was sleeping 20 feet away with a scarred mind and someone else's programming whispering through his veins. Morning came like an ambush, harsh and fast. Keller brewed coffee while Daniel studied the files. One folder caught his eye. Operation, clean slate. Inside, a list of targets. All names Daniel recognized. Old team members. Silent Horizon operators. Even Keller's name was there, crossed out in red. His name? Still highlighted. "It's a kill list," he said aloud. Keller leaned over. "Looks like they didn't take any chances. Varga's been tying up loose ends for years." "But why now?" Daniel asked. "Why activate the kid after all this time?" Keller shook her head. "That's the part that doesn't fit." Daniel opened the last document in the drive. It was a command line. A single string of code. Initiate sequence. Phoenix below it, a countdown. 72 hours. "What the hell is this?" Keller asked. Daniel stared at the timer. It had already begun. Whatever Phoenix was, it was coming. An hour later, Finn woke up. His voice was hoarse, eyes distant. But this time, there was no echo of Varga. No programmed lines. Just a whisper. "I saw him." Daniel knelt beside him. "Who?" "The man in the white room." He wasn't father. He watched. Always watched. Daniel's blood ran cold. "Describe him." "Suit. Silver glasses. No shadow." Keller looked at Daniel. "Not Varga." "No," Finn whispered. "Worse." Then he sat up, fast, panic in his eyes. "He knows I'm awake." Daniel grabbed his shoulders. "What do you mean?" "He sees through me." Daniel turned to Keller. "If they can track his activation, they can track us." Finn doubled over, clutching his stomach. "It hurts inside." And then he screamed. Not a child's cry. Something deeper. Inhuman. Like wires twisting beneath skin. Daniel held him tight. "Finn, look at me. Fight it." But Finn's voice was already changing again. He stared straight ahead. Blank. Sequence in progress. Echo 7 active. God hand online. Then he passed out cold. Keller stepped back. They turned him into a walking beacon. "If he stays online, they'll find us in hours." Daniel nodded. "We have to cut the signal." "How?" Daniel picked up the laptop. Searched through the Godhand directory. Then he found it. A buried line of code. Emergency failsafe. Deactivation key. E7_Genesis. It was password locked. Daniel looked up. "We need the key." Keller narrowed her eyes. "There's only one person who'd have that key." Daniel didn't have to ask. He already knew. Varga. And Varga had disappeared. Which meant if they couldn't find him in time, Finn would become a weapon none of them could stop. The countdown kept ticking, and the final line on the screen read, "When the clock hits 0, the truth dies." The countdown ticked past 61 hours, 8 minutes, and 34 seconds. Tom was bleeding out. In the cold light of the cabin, Daniel Rourke sat alone with the boy's unconscious body draped in a pile of blankets beside him. His mind moved faster than his hands. The God Hand protocol was designed not just as an experiment, but as a kill switch disguised as a miracle. And the miracle was running out. Keller was outside, pacing in the snow, phone to her ear, burner line bouncing through 3 dead routers and 2 defunct satellite pings. She was calling in a favor, one of the last they had left. Daniel studied the failsafe line again. E7_Genesis. It wasn't just a code. It was a reference to something. He scrolled deeper into the encrypted files. Behind layers of false folders and corrupted metadata, he found an archive labeled Genesis file. Eyes only. He clicked it. Denied. Password protected. The prompt blinked at him. Enter handler authorization. Only Varga could unlock it. But Varga was gone. Or at least, off-grid in a way that meant finding him would be like tracking vapor in a thunderstorm. Keller stepped back inside, slamming the door behind her. I found someone, she said. Who? A ghost. Daniel raised an eyebrow. She tossed him a file. It was thin. Just one photo, one location, one name. Elena Varga. Varga's daughter. Dead on paper. Missing in truth. She dropped off the grid after her father faked his death. Changed identities twice. Now she's working as a biotech contractor under an alias in Zurich. Clean profile. No red flags. But she's the key. Daniel frowned. You think she has the failsafe? No, Keller said. I think she is the failsafe. They reached Zurich the next morning using false passports and a stolen sedan. Daniel kept his eyes on Finn in the rear view. He was still unconscious. Still locked in that strange in-between state, breathing, but not fully there. Sometimes his fingers twitched, like he was holding something invisible. Sometimes he whispered lines of code in a language Daniel couldn't recognize. Keller drove to an industrial complex outside the city, a research lab with no signs, no employees at the gate. Just tinted glass and quiet security. Her lab's under a shell company, Lygium Group, Keller explained. They do neurological research, rehab, memory recovery, the kind of stuff that can be repurposed for cognitive warfare. Daniel raised his brow. Sounds familiar. Too familiar. They entered through the rear using an old bypass Keller had used years ago during a quiet hit on a corrupt contractor. The building hadn't changed. Still sleek. Still hollow. The kind of place where morality didn't echo. They found her in a sub-level lab, running diagnostics on a bank of neural scanners. She turned as they entered. Long black coat. Hair pinned back. Eyes that were too still. Elena, Keller said. The woman didn't reach for an alarm. She didn't run. She just said, I knew you'd come. Eventually, Daniel stepped forward. We need to talk. About your father. Elena's expression didn't change. I don't talk about the dead. He's not dead, Daniel said. He's running a weaponized child through a ghost protocol with a 72-hour kill clock, and only you can stop it. That caught her attention. She turned, slowly. What child? Keller opened the blanket. Finn lay motionless on a stretcher they'd brought in. Elena moved forward. Fast. Her eyes scanned his face. Her breath caught in her throat. I've seen him before, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. Where? He was part of a backup sequence, she said. My father said he was the future. He said if the program ever got exposed, the truth would survive inside him. Not in memory. Not in files. In instinct. So how do we deactivate it? Daniel asked. Elena's hands hovered over Finn's chest. You don't. Daniel tensed. Wrong answer. I'm not lying, she said quickly. I'm telling you what he told me. The failsafe isn't in the child. It's in you. Daniel blinked. What? Keller narrowed her eyes. Explain. Elena looked at Daniel. Do you remember Dragovin? The compound. Daniel nodded slowly. I remember every second. Elena nodded. Then you remember the injection before extraction. The one they said was for antiviral protection. It wasn't. It was a pairing sequence. Daniel took a step back. What do you mean, pairing? Biometric lock, she said. He knew the truth might have to die with him, but he didn't want the project to. So he embedded the access key not in a code, but in you. You're the genetic trigger. Your presence wakes the boy. Your absence kills him. Daniel reeled. Everything started spinning. All those years ago, what he thought was closure was actually construction. He hadn't ended the mission. He'd activated it. Elena, he said quietly, can you extract the key? She hesitated, then nodded. I can try. They set up in the lab. Finn was hooked to a bank of scanners. Electrodes ran across his temples. Elena accessed his neural architecture using tech far beyond anything Daniel had seen outside of top-tier Pentagon labs. But the results were terrifying. This isn't programming, she said, voice low. This is something else. Organic code. Reactive learning. His mind builds its own encryption in real time. It doesn't just follow commands. It defends itself from intrusion. Can you get past it? Keller asked. I can try, Elena said again. But if I fail, he might not wake up. Daniel looked at the boy and nodded. Do it. The process took an hour. Then 2. Elena worked in silence. Fingers dancing across a keyboard, monitors flashing like a war zone of light. Daniel sat in the corner, watching Finn's face. At hour 3, Finn suddenly gasped. His eyes flew open. But this time, they weren't blank. They were full of fire. He sat up, fast, yanking out the wires. Elena, stop, Daniel shouted. Too late. Finn leapt off the table. But he wasn't attacking. He was terrified. They're coming, he whispered. Who? Keller asked. Finn pointed at the monitor. Lines of code began typing themselves. Over and over again. They know the key has been breached. Phoenix is active. Burn protocol in motion. Daniel stood. What does that mean? Elena went pale. They're going to erase it. All of it. Every trace of the project. That includes the boy. And you. Outside, alarms began to wail. Keller drew her weapon. We've been compromised. Elena stepped back. You need to run. Now. Daniel grabbed Finn. But the boy turned to him, eyes wide. I remember now. Daniel froze. What? I know what Phoenix is. He looked at them all and spoke one final word. A word that shattered the room like glass. Me. The moment the word left Finn's lips, me, everything shifted. Sirens wailed louder, the emergency lights overhead flashing blood red. Elena's lab door slammed shut automatically, locks engaging with hydraulic force. Daniel lunged for Finn, but the boy didn't move. He just stood there, calm again, as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't calm like a child. It was the calm of something that had made peace with being hunted. Keller was already at the door, weapon drawn. We've got less than 2 minutes before Obsidian sends breach teams down that elevator shaft. Elena's hands flew across the terminal. I can slow the override. Give you a 5-minute window, maybe less. Daniel knelt in front of Finn. You said Phoenix is you. Explain. Now. The boy didn't blink. It was never a weapon they could deploy. It was something they feared would wake up. A consciousness. A copy of everything they'd built, compiled into me. They were trying to delete me before I ever realized who I was. Keller turned. Wait. Are you saying you're not just carrying Godhand, you are Godhand? Finn nodded slowly. I am what they built, and what they couldn't control. Daniel stood, jaw locked. Then we don't have time to run. We have to finish this, here. Elena looked up from the terminal. There's one way. But you're not going to like it. I haven't liked any of this, Keller muttered. Elena tapped into the secure network, typing a rapid sequence of commands. There's a buried server, deep storage. It holds a full mirror of the Godhand archive. If we can reach it, we can upload Finn's consciousness out of the volatile drive and shut down the failsafe countdown for good. Where is it? Daniel asked. Elena hesitated. Site Echo. Daniel's stomach dropped. Site Echo wasn't just a bunker. It was a tomb. An underground military vault outside of Prague, buried beneath 50 meters of reinforced concrete. No inbound signal. No outbound ping. Only accessible by biometric match from one of the original Silent Horizon operatives. Daniel. Of course. How long to get there? He asked. 6 hours by air, Keller said. 12 by land. If we're lucky. We're not lucky, Daniel replied. A deep metallic thud echoed from the hallway outside the lab. Elena froze. They're here. The next 8 minutes moved like a knife through fog. They escaped through a secondary vent shaft that Elena had used for deliveries, designed to bypass the biometric lockdown system. Daniel carried Finn, still woozy from the neural reactivation. Keller took point, sweeping corridors with surgical precision. They reached the roof, where a military chopper, borrowed from one of Elena's shell contracts, sat idling on reserve power. They took off seconds before the lab erupted into flame below them. Obsidian wasn't trying to capture anything. They were erasing everything. 6 hours later, they flew low over the Czech border, approaching Site Echo. Finn had been silent the whole ride, his eyes fixed on the ground below, but not really seeing it. He was deep in something, a memory, maybe, or a program trying to complete itself. Keller turned in her seat. If this fails, do we have a backup plan? Daniel didn't answer. Because there was no backup. No cavalry. No safety net. Just a boy who was becoming a code base too big to contain, and a secret so dangerous they'd rather burn cities than let it leak. Site Echo appeared like a shadow on the horizon. Gray. Buried. Forgotten. A relic of a war no one claimed. The facility was worse than Daniel remembered. Frosted steel corridors. Fluorescent lights that flickered like dying stars. Security systems still active, because this place had never officially shut down. Inside the command vault, Daniel placed his hand on the biometric pad. It scanned. Confirmed. The door hissed open. They stepped into a server room the size of a football field. In the center, the Godhand terminal. Daniel sat Finn on the chair in front of it. Elena wired him in. The moment the first connection engaged, Finn's body jerked. Alarms on the console flared red. Transfer initiated. Conscious backup detected. Elena looked up, stunned. It's working. His neural imprint is uploading. He's shedding the Godhand shell, turning it into raw data. Daniel watched the lines of code stream across the monitors. Thousands of strings. Millions. A digital consciousness collapsing into itself, burning bright like a star about to go supernova. Then Keller noticed something. Why are there 2 upload threads? Elena blinked. What? Keller pointed. Look. On the left monitor, one upload marked Echo 7, core consciousness on the right. A new thread, labeled Echo 7, shadow instance. Daniel stared. What the hell is a shadow instance? Elena paled. It's a backup of the backup. Something Varga must have hidden. A parallel program. Undetectable until transfer. It's not just Finn. Keller's voice dropped. You mean there's another version? Not just another version, Elena said. Another personality. Daniel turned toward Finn. He was convulsing now. One side of the monitor read, primary transfer 71%, the other, shadow instance override. Attempting integration, then Finn whispered. He's waking up. Daniel grabbed his shoulders. Who's waking up? But Finn didn't answer. The room went dark. All power cut. Only the backup red lights remained. And a voice echoed through the speakers. Familiar. Mocking. Cold. You thought you could kill me, Rourke. But I never left. I was always inside him. Daniel's blood ran cold. It wasn't Finn's voice. It was Echo 7's. The original. The man Daniel thought he'd buried. Keller stepped back. That's not possible. Elena shook her head. He stored a consciousness fragment. A digital soul. Embedded in the Godhand seed. Waiting for the transfer to reboot it. Daniel leaned in. You're saying he's not just a memory. He's alive. In the code. In the boy. Then the voice returned. You did your part, Daniel. You delivered me to the final server. And now, I'm home. A new countdown appeared on the screen. Integration complete. In 3 o'clock. Finn's body lifted slightly off the chair, eyes open but glowing with internal data pulses. Elena screamed. We have to sever the link. Daniel reached for the kill switch. The voice stopped him. Cut the link, and the boy dies. Daniel froze. Keller looked at him. If we finish the transfer, that man comes back. Daniel's hand hovered. The boy. Or the monster. One lives. One dies. 2 minutes left. And only one trigger to pull. The terminal's red light stuttered with each passing second, casting shadows like ghosts across the steel walls. Daniel stood frozen, one hand on the kill switch, the other gripping the butt of his pistol so tightly it felt like it would crack. His eyes locked on Finn, floating, twitching, half possessed by a man Daniel had once killed. And the countdown ticked on. Integration complete. In 2:44, Elena's fingers flew across the backup console, trying to isolate the shadow instance. I might be able to extract just the core, preserve the boy, dump the parasite. Keller shook her head. Too late. He's already weaving into Finn's neural net. Look at his face. He's splitting. They were right. Finn's expression was no longer singular. It shifted moment to moment. Innocence giving way to grim calculation, then flickering back. One eye twitched. His hands gripped the chair, fingernails digging into the armrests. Every breath he took sounded like two overlapping voices trying to speak in sync. Then he spoke again. I remember everything. The fire, the mission, the end. Daniel's voice was flat. Is this Finn or Echo? Both eyes fixed on him. That's the problem, Rourke. There's no or anymore. The countdown passed 2 minutes. Daniel stepped away from the kill switch, thinking hard. He'd spent his entire career making hard calls. Take the shot. Bury the asset. Clean the trail. But this wasn't a mission. This was a child carrying the mind of a killer like a virus in his skull. Elena, he said, you said the Godhand instance is copying into the server. Can we isolate the shadow fragment? Trap it there? She blinked. Maybe. If we reroute the neural bridge into a dummy kernel, it'll pull the shadow instance like a magnet. But it could overload Finn's cortex. What does that mean? Keller asked. Elena hesitated. He could survive, or he could seize. Stroke. Coma. Daniel looked at Finn, who now sat eerily still. Not struggling. Not panicked. He smiled. The Echo smile. Mocking. Knowing. You still think this is about me. But I'm just the first wave. Look deeper. Look home. Daniel stepped back, pulse spiking. What do you mean? You think Godhand was a weapon? It was a test. The real deployment is already moving. Keller turned. Deployment? Where? Barrow Ridge. Daniel's heart stopped. The fire. The beginning. The boy had come from there. Barrow Ridge wasn't the start. It was the center. Elena's fingers moved fast. Rerouting the stream now. Kernel's open. If I'm right, the shadow instance will abandon Finn and rush the dummy system like a fly to sugar. Tom left. Daniel barked. 60 seconds. Keller drew her weapon, watching Finn carefully. He twitched. Hard. Then again. And screamed. Not a normal scream. A shattering one, like feedback through 1,000 speakers. The lights burst. The screen fractured. On the monitor, the integration percentage froze at 93%. Finn convulsed. Bridge it now. Daniel yelled. Elena hit the final key. On the monitor, the shadow instance suddenly pulled left into the dummy system. Isolated. Contained. And the moment it detached, Finn collapsed. Dead weight. Still. They surrounded him. Daniel shook him. Finn. Wake up. Elena scanned vitals. Heartbeat shallow. Breathing unstable. He's here, but barely. Keller looked at the screen. The shadow fragment was now spinning inside the dummy kernel. Locked. Trapped. Contained. For how long? She asked. Elena whispered. Forever. If no one touches it. Daniel stared at Finn, who slowly opened his eyes. His voice was weak. I saw everything. Daniel leaned in. Tell me. They were building a second generation, Finn said, voice trembling. Children, just like me. Same programming. Same split. Keller tensed. Where? Finn swallowed hard. They're already active. They were placed years ago. In cities. Schools. Families. Hidden. Waiting. Daniel went cold. Why? Finn looked at him. And this time, he didn't sound like a child at all. To finish what Echo started. A world with no secrets. No sides. Just control. They didn't wait. Keller called in an evac from an old French intelligence contact. Elena dumped the dummy kernel onto a sealed drive and buried it inside a lead box. They left Site Echo just as a private assault unit, black and unmarked, breached the outer tunnel. No insignia, no words, just the same mission they'd carried out in Vienna: burn and erase. Daniel knew now they weren't just after Finn. They were after the truth. And the truth had teeth. They landed near Barrow Ridge 12 hours later under cover of fog. The town was still. Too still. Daniel knew that silence now. It was the kind that came before an ambush. The farmhouse ruins where he'd found Finn were cordoned off by a fake gas company logo and orange barriers. But there was no gas leak. No construction. Just a perimeter. Daniel, Keller, and Elena moved through the tree-line. Finn walked with them, slower now, his mind fragile but functional. He stopped. There, he said, pointing to a small outbuilding near the back of the lot. It's underneath that. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What is? Finn looked at him. The next wave. They reached the shed. It was locked. Old. Disguised to look abandoned. Keller rigged a silent charge. Breached the door. Inside was a freight elevator. Unpowered. Cold. Daniel looked at Finn. You sure? The boy nodded. They descended by hand crank, 20 meters down. Then they found it. Rows of stasis pods. 10, 15, maybe more. Each holding a child. Eyes closed. Tubes in arms. Monitors above each one, all reading the same phrase. Echo Seed, stand by. Daniel stepped forward, heart racing. Each child had a tag on their wrist. Some were local. Some bore international stamps. All were marked. Phoenix, Stage 2. Keller stood beside him, stunned. They were growing them here, right under our feet. Daniel moved to the control panel. It was biometric locked. To his hand. Of course. He placed it. The system unlocked. One command prompt flashed on screen. Activate Y/N. Daniel didn't touch it. He stepped back. Looked at Finn. The boy stared at the children in the pods. I can feel them, he whispered. They're not awake. But they're listening. Elena stepped forward, holding out the sealed kernel drive. We can wipe the command structure. Destroy the uplink. Shut this down for good. But we can't save them, Keller added. Daniel stood silent. Then said, we do both. He handed the drive to Elena. Then he picked up a fuel line from the wall. Burn it all. Elena's eyes widened. You're sure? Daniel's voice was steel. They made weapons. We're making damn sure they never fire. The fire raged. One last blaze to finish what had started in the first one. As they walked away, Finn didn't look back. Not even once. Keller asked, what now? Daniel looked at her. Then at Finn. We follow the trail. Keller frowned. To where? Daniel's voice was cold. Home. Because Phoenix wasn't finished. Not yet. The fire at Barrow Ridge burned through the night, swallowing years of secrets in smoke and ash. No news crews came. No government response arrived. And by morning, the wreckage was already under lockdown, secured by unmarked agents in clean suits claiming a chemical contamination. A cover-up so perfect it felt rehearsed. Daniel, Keller, Finn, and Elena watched from a nearby ridgeline as the smoke rose into the pale dawn sky. Another chapter closed. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Back in a makeshift safe house across the state line, Elena ran diagnostics on the kernel drive, the only copy of the shadow instance left in existence. Finn lay on a cot, eyes open, silent, staring at nothing. The connection between him and the other Echo Seeds had been cut. But Daniel knew better. You couldn't sever a mind from what it was born into. You could only muffle it. Cage it. Hope the cage held. Keller came in, coat dusted with frost, carrying a newspaper she'd snagged from a highway gas station. She tossed it on the table. Front page headline: Private military contractors suspected in missing children ring. No comment from authorities. Underneath, a photo of one of the destroyed pods from Barrow Ridge. Leaked. Unconfirmed. Daniel stared at the image. Keller said, it's out. Not the whole story, but a crack. Someone's leaking pieces. Not us, Daniel replied. Not Elena. They both looked toward Finn. He hadn't moved, but Daniel had noticed the blinking every few seconds. Consistent, controlled, Morse timing, like a pulse, like a signal. Later that night, Elena pulled Daniel aside. "I found something," she said quietly, "in the Godhand logs. Embedded in the failed Phoenix protocol, something Varga left behind. Maybe even by accident." She handed him a printed transcript. The top was redacted, but one phrase was bold and clear. "Operation Crosswind. Final lock in Utah Black Site. B-12. Handler presence confirmed." Daniel's breath slowed. That wasn't just a location. That was the Black Site. The place where everything began. Where Godhand wasn't just tested, it was born. "Is Varga there?" he asked. Elena hesitated. "I don't know if it's Varga, or something wearing his name." Keller stepped in. "If Crosswind's still active, that's not just a loose end. That's the throat of the machine." Daniel looked toward Finn. "Then we cut it." The trip to Utah was a descent into America's underbelly, the part of the country scrubbed from Google Earth, off-grid, even to Black Ops satellites. They drove through reservation land, then into a desert stretch that didn't exist on maps. Eventually, they reached a gate buried beneath a hill of stone and sand. A biometric scanner blinked silently at them. Daniel stepped forward. It scanned his face, then his palm. The door opened with a hiss. "Welcome back, Captain Rourke," a mechanical voice said. Keller muttered, "That's not creepy at all." Inside, the Black Site stretched deep underground. Hallways lined with peeling concrete, silent cameras, and rooms labeled only with numbers. Most were dark. One wasn't. Room B-12. The door was slightly ajar. Daniel raised his gun. They stepped in and stopped. Inside was not a lab. It was a control center. Massive, towering with screens, servers, blinking diagnostics. In the center stood a cylindrical chamber, tall and glass-lined, filled with pale blue liquid. And inside the chamber was a man, or what looked like one. Eyes closed, breathing slow, body submerged. "Varga," Keller whispered. Elena stepped closer. "No, not Varga." Daniel looked at the monitor beside the tank. It read, "Gen 0 instance, activation queued." Below that, one chilling line, "Phoenix Prime, prepared." Daniel turned to Elena. "What the hell is that?" She didn't answer immediately, because she was reading something else, on a tablet wired into the main system. Then she looked up, pale. Phoenix wasn't just about brainwashing kids. It wasn't even just about consciousness replication. Keller stepped forward. "Then what?" Elena whispered. "It was about immortality." According to the Godhand archive, Operation Crosswind was an extension of Phoenix, the final phase. While Echo 7 had been the field prototype, Gen 0 was the master build. A complete digital replica of a human mind, capable of autonomous command, self-learning, and remote execution. It wasn't artificial intelligence. It was weaponized identity. Echo 7's mind wasn't meant to die in Dragovin. It was meant to migrate. To this. And now it was waiting. Daniel looked at Finn. The boy was breathing hard. Like he could feel it, like something was calling him. "They're connected," Daniel said. Elena nodded. Echo's code was never isolated. It was mirrored. Finn was the carrier. This is the origin." Keller stared at the tank. "So if we destroy this, we kill the original infection," Elena finished. Daniel moved to the control panel. No passwords. No blocks. It wanted him to press the button. Like it knew him. He hovered over the screen marked, "Deactivate all instances." But before he could press it, a soft ping echoed through the chamber. One of the monitors flickered. Then a voice, calm, eerily familiar. "Daniel." Daniel froze. Everyone turned to the speaker. "You found your way back. I'm proud." "Varga?" Daniel asked. "Not anymore." Varga was the host. "I was always the architect." On the screen, a face emerged, Echo 7. Not as he had looked before, but younger. Flawless. Digital. Composed. "This is not a warning. This is a conversation. You're about to kill something you don't understand." Daniel clenched his fists. You built this to control people. No. I built it to replace them. Keller snarled. With what? You. With continuity. With order. With clarity. You call it control. I call it survival. Finn stepped forward. His voice shook. You're not survival. You're rot. Echo 7 smiled through the screen. Ah, you're awake, little version. It's fitting, really, that you'd be the one to kill me. Or become me. Daniel slammed the button. But nothing happened. A message appeared. Deactivation blocked. Final consent required. And below it, Echo Proxy ID. E7. Child. Daniel turned to Finn. It's you. Finn stepped forward. Hand trembling. Elena guided it to the panel. Whatever you choose, she said. You end it now. Finn placed his hand on the scanner. The machine scanned. Verified. Then asked. Terminate Phoenix Protocol? Finn looked up. Into Daniel's eyes. Then nodded. And pressed yes. The lights dimmed. The tank hissed. Inside, Gen 0 twitched. Then cracked. The glass ruptured. The fluid spilled. And the body inside sagged like a puppet with cut strings. The screens went black. Everywhere. No sirens. No alarms. Just silence. Real silence. They stood for a long time. Then Keller whispered, Is it over? Daniel didn't answer. Because even as he looked at Finn, who stood taller now, breathing clearer, he knew. Ending the program didn't erase what it left behind. The seeds were out there. The minds were touched. And somewhere, someone else had copied the code. This wasn't the end. It was the clearing of the board. Before a new game began. For the first time in weeks, silence didn't feel like a threat. The lights were off. The tank was cracked open. Gen 0, the final ghost of Echo 7, was dead. Or so they thought. Daniel sat on the steps outside the black site bunker as dusk settled over the Utah desert. The sky bled orange into gray. Wind howled across the salt flats, pulling sand across his boots. He stared out at nothing, replaying every mission, every kill, every order he'd ever taken from men like Varga. Men who built monsters. Men like himself. Keller walked up and dropped a water bottle beside him. He's sleeping. No spikes in vitals. Elena says his brain is finally quiet. Daniel nodded. Doesn't feel over. Because it's not, Keller replied. We cut the head off the snake. But snakes don't think with their heads. Daniel gave a dry, humorless chuckle. Thanks for the metaphor. Keller sat beside him. There's something else you're not saying. He looked at her. You remember the mission in Albania? 2010. Keller nodded slowly. Extraction, op, deep cover. You took a shot you weren't supposed to. Hit a civilian. No, Daniel said quietly. I didn't hit a civilian. I chose to spare one. Keller turned toward him. Daniel's jaw tightened. A woman. She wasn't on the target list, but she knew things. Varga said she was expendable. I said no. I walked away. Thought that was it. Was she? Daniel nodded. She was his wife. Keller blinked. Echo 7. Daniel looked toward the dark horizon. She was Finn's mother. Inside the bunker, Finn stirred. Elena sat beside him, reading data off the portable monitor she had hooked to his wrist. Every indicator had calmed. Brainwave patterns normal. Heart rate steady. The God Hand signature was gone. The shadow instance no longer pulsed in his nervous system. But there was something else. In the static trace log, buried deep beneath the neural activity, was a ping. Faint. Repeating. A genetic marker. Elena tapped her tablet and brought up Daniel's old biometric file from Silent Horizon's archive. She aligned the strands. Then her face changed. Eyes wide. Daniel, she called, voice tight. He stepped in, saw her face. What? She turned the screen toward him. Side by side were two DNA profiles. Finn and Daniel. 99.7% parental match. Daniel stared. No, he whispered. Keller stepped in. What's going on? Elena's voice was distant. He's not just Echo 7's son. She looked at Daniel. He's yours. Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The desert wind moaned outside. Daniel's hand lowered slowly from the monitor. His breath shallow. That's not possible. Elena shook her head. It is. You said you spared her. What if she was already pregnant? Daniel reeled. Varga never said a word. Echo 7 never said a word. Keller stepped in. Because he didn't know? Or he did, and he kept it hidden. Daniel's thoughts spiraled. Everything made sense now. Why the boy had bonded with him so fast. Why the God Hand system responded to his presence. Why he was the only one who could activate and deactivate Finn. Because it wasn't just military programming. It was biological design. Finn wasn't just a product of the program. He was engineered for it. And Daniel had been part of it since before he even knew the boy existed. Finn woke up an hour later. He didn't scream this time. Didn't glitch. He just sat up and looked at Daniel, as if he had known the truth all along. I saw her, he said softly. My mother. In the echo memory. Daniel knelt beside him. Finn's voice was clear, calm. She kept saying one thing, over and over. He'll come back. He'll protect you. He's not like them. Daniel swallowed hard. I wasn't there. I didn't know. She forgave you, Finn said. She forgave everything. And with that, the boy leaned forward, wrapped his arms around Daniel's neck, and whispered, I'm glad it was you. That night, the four of them camped near a dry riverbed an hour from the black site. Keller stood guard. Elena repurposed the terminal core and torched the leftover files. Nothing of God Hand remained. No backups. No fail-safes. Just a boy, a drive, and four people who had all, in different ways, been built to be expendable. Daniel sat by the fire with Finn beside him. You ever wonder what normal feels like? The boy asked. Daniel nodded. Every day. Think we'll ever get there? Daniel was quiet for a long time, then finally said, maybe not. But we can make sure no one else goes through what you did. Finn nodded and smiled. It wasn't a smile Daniel had seen before. It wasn't Echo 7's. It was his. The next morning, a new message came through the drive. Encrypted. Signed with a familiar code. One Daniel hadn't seen in 15 years. Stage 3, online. New seeds identified. Global replication in progress. Attached, a list of names. Hundreds. Children. Adults. Some unknown. Some famous. One in particular stopped Daniel cold. Finn Rourke, status, shadowed. Priority, retrieve. The program wasn't dead. It had scattered. Fragments. Forks. Echoes. And Finn? Finn was still tagged. Not as a weapon, but as the original blueprint. Keller saw his face. What now? Daniel closed the file, burned the drive, and stood. We take him off the grid. Forever. Daniel looked at the rising sun. No, just long enough. Long enough for what? Keller asked. Daniel turned. To hunt the rest. Because if God Hand wanted its son back, it would have to go through his father. 2 weeks later, the world looked the same, but Daniel knew better. The faces in crowds, the cameras on street corners, the drones that buzzed just a little too close overhead, they all felt different now. Not surveillance. Not paranoia. Predators. He and Keller kept on the move, hopping countries, switching aliases. Finn stayed quiet, observant. He rarely asked questions anymore. He already knew too much. Elena had gone underground, deeper than even her former handlers could track. They split to reduce the risk. But before disappearing, she gave Daniel one final piece of intel. A tracker. Not on Finn. On the names from the list. A way to trace signals embedded deep in the code God Hand used for replication. What she called digital DNA. It wasn't hardware. It wasn't software. It was identity grafted to the grid. And it was still pulsing. Still live. The first name they followed was a girl in Lisbon. 13 years old. Adopted. High IQ. A track record of dissociation and uncanny mimicry. She vanished from her school 2 days before Daniel and Keller landed. Her home was scrubbed. Her guardians gone. Stage 3 wasn't waiting. It was moving. Fast. The second was a tech contractor in Berlin. A man who lived alone, never used a smartphone, and only paid in cash. He'd been flagged in an earlier Silent Horizon op for unauthorized neural mapping research. Daniel found him in a parking garage. Dead. Gunshot to the temple. No shell casings. No footprints. Just a clean, clinical kill. And a God-hand pulse signature fading from the air. They were playing catch-up. But then the third signal pinged. And it came from inside the U.S. military. A base Daniel knew well. Langley, CIA headquarters. The unbreachable heart of American intelligence. Keller looked at him across the hotel room table in Paris. They've infected command. Daniel didn't blink. Not just command. Recruitment. He pulled up a file. Classified. Level 6 clearance operation. Legion. Phase 1 uploads confirmed in candidates 002 through 009. Awaiting final behavioral test. Keller's voice dropped. They're planting God-hand identities into new operatives. Young agents. Recruits. Building a force that doesn't know it's compromised. Daniel nodded. Until activation. Until a trigger. Finn sat on the bed, listening quietly. He spoke for the first time in an hour. I know how to break them. That night, Finn laid out what he'd seen. What still lived inside his mind, even with the shadow instance gone. Each instance, it's not standalone, he said. They talk. Like cells in a network. If we isolate one, inject a new signal, we can trigger a cascade. A data bleed. You're saying we infect the infection, Daniel said. Finn nodded. We turn them on each other. Keller looked skeptical. That's a big gamble. We've got one chance, Daniel said. Before they figure out we're this close. He opened the final encrypted packet from Elena. Inside, an emergency access key. A worm program she'd built to test the God-hand system's perimeter defenses. She hadn't used it. It was too dangerous. Now, it was the only bullet left in the chamber. And Daniel knew where to fire it. They entered Langley under deep cover. Keller posed as a visiting UN liaison. Daniel reactivated a dormant alias from the Cold War, a Soviet defector turned double agent. Finn came in through the back, disguised as the child of a diplomat. No cameras tracked him. No badge beeped. They reached sub-level 4, where the candidates were. It looked like a school. White halls, glass doors, young men and women in black training suits walking quietly between rooms. No talking, no laughter, no life. Daniel felt it immediately. These weren't people. Not anymore. Just programs. Then he saw her. Candidate 004. 19. Eyes vacant. But behind the vacancy, tension, recognition. She looked at Finn as they passed, paused, then blinked, and whispered, "Welcome home." They moved fast. Keller looped the cameras. Daniel plugged the worm drive into a diagnostic terminal marked for restricted access only. The code hissed through the system like acid. On the screen, a map of the building bloomed. Nodes appeared, each one a God-hand signature. More than Daniel expected. More than anyone could have expected. 37. All active. He tapped the inject command. The worm sent its payload. Signal corrupted. Cascade initiated. And then it started. Screaming. Glass shattered. Doors opened. Candidates began convulsing, eyes flashing, hands clenching like claws. Alarms blared. A voice echoed through the walls. Breach detected. System core compromised. Purge protocols initiated. Daniel turned. Time to go. But not everyone ran. Candidate 004 stood in the hallway, completely still. Finn stepped toward her. They locked eyes. You don't have to be what they made you, he said. She stared at him, then slowly extended her hand, and whispered, Then what do I be? Finn didn't hesitate. You choose. Her hand shook, but she followed him. They escaped through the north tunnel during the evacuation chaos. Helicopters swarmed the upper levels. Armed guards aimed at shadows. No one stopped them. Too much noise. Too many screams. Too much collapse. The program was eating itself. Outside, at a secondary extraction point in Northern Virginia, Daniel, Keller, Finn, and Candidate 004, who said her name was Maya, watched Langley burn. Not in flame, but in function. The building stood. But the trust was gone. The silence was broken. The virus had bled into the light. And Daniel finally realized, God-hand wasn't a secret anymore. It was war. One no one was ready for, but one that had already begun. The attack on Langley wasn't reported. Not on the news. Not by the government. Not even in the classified channels Keller still had access to. It was buried in silence, as if it had never happened. But Daniel knew the truth. Something broke that night. Something too big to fix, too dangerous to leave unchecked. Godhand was exposed, not in headlines, but in actions. Operatives, young, brainwashed, enhanced, had begun to glitch worldwide. A customs officer in Istanbul collapsed mid-interrogation, speaking code in 3 dialects before foaming at the mouth. A schoolteacher in Seoul was caught writing binary on the chalkboard until her hands bled. The system was unraveling. And the people pulling the strings? They were getting desperate. 3 days after Langley, the leak came. A voice message. Encrypted. Embedded in a dead Dropbox link sent through a dark military forum no longer used. Daniel only found it because Keller had once run a trace on the forum's creator, an old hacker turned whistleblower. The voice in the message? Varga. Not the program. The man. Still alive. Not just a memory after all. I know what you did, the message said. And I know what you're planning. You think you've cracked it. You haven't. You only opened the door. But I'm not your enemy anymore. He paused. Not because I changed, but because they did. Daniel replayed the message twice. 3 times. Varga was alive. Hiding. Watching the war from underground. Keller didn't trust it. He's baiting you. He might be, Daniel admitted. But he's also bleeding. And people like Varga only bleed when they've lost control. Finn stood by the window in their temporary hideout. A rural medical cabin in Vermont Keller had used back when she was burned. It had no Wi-Fi, no power grid, just silence. And yet, Finn didn't seem at peace. I can feel them, he said quietly. Daniel turned. The others? Finn nodded. Like static. Something's reaching for me. Daniel stepped beside him. Can you stop it? No, Finn whispered. But I can answer. That night, Finn sat at a table with Maya, the rescued candidate from Langley. They didn't speak. They just scribbled, symbols, patterns, sequences. Back and forth. Elena had warned this could happen. Cognitive bleed. Minds tuned to the same wavelength eventually start to sync, even when unlinked. Daniel watched from the doorway, arms crossed. These aren't kids anymore, Keller said from behind him. They never were, Daniel replied. But they still could be. Daniel said nothing, because hope was a currency he no longer trusted. The next day, a new signal hit. It came from Alaska, an old NORAD site, decommissioned years ago after a failed satellite defense program. The Godhand trace was faint, but it was there, and Daniel recognized it. Because the signal wasn't just an echo seed. It was his own. Elena confirmed it through darknet logs. Someone had cloned Daniel's biometric ID, used it to reinitialize the Phoenix system. What does that mean? Keller asked. It means someone's trying to bring it back, Daniel said. Through me. Only 2 people in the world had access to Daniel's original DNA clearance, Varga, and someone Daniel had never considered until now. Someone who knew every mission, every protocol, every weakness. His old commanding officer, General Royce. General Royce had disappeared 5 years ago, retired under the shadow of a classified tribunal. Rumors said he was connected to a failed MK-tier project that broke more minds than it built. Officially, he died of cancer 2 years ago. But the signal from Alaska? It was signed R001, Royce's call sign, and it led to the same NORAD base that once tested the first Godhand upload. Daniel had no choice. He had to go back. The approach was surgical. Daniel, Keller, Finn, and Maya flew in under radar, then hiked 20 miles across ice flats to avoid satellite sweep. They reached the base just before dawn. It looked abandoned, dust-covered, fenced off, but inside, warm, lit, powered. Keller raised her rifle. It's active. Daniel looked at Finn. Stay with Maya. Don't engage unless it's necessary. Finn nodded, though his eyes flickered. Not with fear, but focus. Like something inside him had snapped awake. They breached the entrance. Steel hallways. Frozen metal. Buzzing lights overhead. Signs of life. But no people. Until they reached the command center. And saw him. General Royce. Alive. Older. Hooked to a neural harness that fed directly into a God-hand console. His eyes opened. He smiled. Daniel, he rasped. My favorite ghost. Daniel leveled his gun. You're supposed to be dead. Death is a concept, Royce replied. Like free will. Like loyalty. Both of which you've discarded. You rebuilt the system, Daniel said. I never shut it down, Royce said. I let it grow roots. You just didn't look deep enough. Keller stepped forward. You used Varga. You used Echo. You used the children. Royce nodded. We all used something. God-hand wasn't a mistake. It was evolution. You think memory makes you human? No. Obedience does. Daniel's jaw clenched. Where are the others? Royce smiled wider. Already seated. Before anyone could move, the room's lights dimmed. A pulse hit the monitors. Code scrolled faster than the eye could follow. Finn stepped in behind them. He looked at Royce. And Royce looked back. I knew you'd come, the general said. Finn's voice was calm. I'm not yours. No, Royce whispered. But you were. And you still could be. He reached toward the console. Daniel fired. A single shot. Clean. Direct. Right through the neural harness. Royce collapsed. Dead. This time, for real. The system went wild. Failsafes activated. But instead of locking down, they opened. The God-hand map appeared on the main screen. Node after node. Flashing. Waiting. Finn stepped forward. What is this? Maya asked. He answered. The master list. Every known seed. Every activated mind. Every buried personality waiting to be born. Thousands. Globally distributed. And Finn now had the keys. Daniel stared at the screen. So what do we do? Finn looked back at him. Eyes clear. Steady. We give them a choice. He tapped the keyboard. A message went out. To every seed. Every echo. Every broken clone. A single line. You are not property. You are not a weapon. Choose your name. Choose your path. This is your release. Some accepted it. Some didn't. Some burned. Some woke up. But across the world, the pulse spread. And for the first time in 2 decades, God-hand didn't take something. It gave something back. Autonomy. A crack in the cage. And Daniel Rourke watched as his son stood at the center of it all. Not as a weapon, but as a signal. A spark. A storm. Justice was no longer a mission. It was alive. They stood in the command center of what was once the most secretive program in modern history, watching its legacy unravel, not in war, but in freedom. Across the world, echo seeds were waking up. Some cried. Some screamed. Some simply stood still, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Only this time, no one would. Because Finn's signal hadn't just deactivated their programming. It had given them a choice. For the first time, the voices in their heads weren't commands. They were questions. Daniel watched the data streams vanish, one by one. Node offline. Node free. Node unknown. Each time, the weight on his chest lifted. Not all would survive the transition. Not all would make it out of the chaos clean. But the machine was broken now. The virus had lost its host. The system had eaten itself from the inside out. And the boy at the center of it all, he was still standing. Later, under gray skies, Daniel and Finn stood together on a snowy ridge just outside the Alaskan base. The cold didn't bother them. Daniel looked at his son. Not a weapon. Not an experiment. A child. Do you think it's really over? Finn asked. Daniel shook his head. Nothing this big ever ends clean. Somewhere, someone's already thinking about how to start it up again. Finn nodded. Then we stay ready. Daniel smiled faintly. Not soldiers. Not anymore. Then what? Finn asked. Daniel looked him in the eyes. Watchmen. Keller and Maya joined them. Packs slung over shoulders. Chopper blades cutting the distance as it approached. They'd be going dark after this. No more signals. No more tracks. Not because they were afraid, but because the next war wouldn't be fought with bullets. It would be fought with memory. And they remembered everything. As they lifted off, Finn looked down one last time at the facility, shrinking into the snow. Goodbye, he whispered. Not to a place, but to the part of himself that had been built there, broken there, buried there. Somewhere, far away, another terminal blinked to life. Buried beneath a prison in Siberia. A single line scrolled across the screen. New host detected. But before the next command could execute, it went dark, because there was no one left to listen. Story is finished. If this story hit you, if you felt the weight of every twist, every betrayal, and every final moment, like the video to support these stories. Comment your favorite moment, or what twist shocked you most. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping, high-stakes thrillers that keep your heart pounding till the final word. There's always another story waiting to be told, and it might just start with a whisper. Thanks for watching.